on the study stream. Uh, it, I just put multi-view in here. I'm going to do this for everybody that's going to be sitting in the chat. I just, yeah, I just put multi-stream on here, and it is forcing me with all of these errors. I'm just going to get this done. I might have to re-record all of this stuff, but we're going to do it anyway. What's up, guys? So, why is the chat bot not here? Why is the screen not here? I'm really freaking annoyed right now, guys. So okay, I think we've got all of our media synced up. Hopefully, you guys are here on Instagram, you guys are here on Twitch, and you're here on YouTube. I have each one of the respective chat windows open, but problem is I don't know whether or not it's syncing correctly or not. If we need to redo this, it's fine. My intention today in sharing this, first thing I want to do, a lot of times I'm noticing people running into issues with heads up play when they get to the end of a sit and go or they get to an end of a multi-table tournament. It's something I've personally worked on really hard, and it's maximized my capability of usually the difference between first and second has a tendency to be a very, very large distance. And if you don't have the capability of being able to close these things out, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. In sit and goes, almost all of your ROI at the micro and low stakes is going to come from maximizing whether or not you can win heads up or not. When you start getting into, like on Global Poker, we have some of these jumpstart sit and goes. Third place, you get your money back plus a couple of cents. And the difference between second and first often winds up being almost double. And if you're finishing in third too often, it's not good. If you're finishing in second often, it's not good. Fuck. Everybody wants to get first. It's just how it goes. So we're going to study some of those spots today. I also want to review some hands, some real tough hands. Admittedly, over this last week, I have had a really good run. We have been, I've final tabled 6 tournaments. If you include what I've done on Ignition, I final tabled 8 tournaments this week. And I've won 2, finished second in another, and yeah, the other 5 were middling, like fifth through 7th. I don't think I had any third places. I don't think I had any fourth places this week. It's all been 5 through 7. I ran into one last night, really frustrating, where I flopped top 2 pair and could not get somebody. I was first in chips. I could not get the person that was second in chips off of a shitty flush draw. They had a really bad flush draw. And then we're talking in a PKO too. But as I got to know the player and watch him play, I hung around a long time after that. Limped, sat there in 5th place for a very, very long time. And got up to first place in chips again. That hand happened. I knew I was going to try to get his money. I got it in good, but it didn't happen. That shit happens, but when it comes to like maximizing your heads up play, you're going to run into variant spots, but that one hurt. That one hurt, especially because it wound up being it was a 70-30 spot, and I didn't hold. I did not hold. All right, guys, let's jump into this. So, something you're gonna notice, and mind you, this is just heads up. Heads up is not the same as blind versus blind when you start coming down to this. I do want to thank West Tennessee Cowboy. aka Dave. I do want to thank him for bringing this to my attention. Um, blind. This is blind versus blind. So when you're playing at a full table and you're seeing blind versus blind, the strategy is very different than when you get down to heads up play. And if you see here, look at the difference. This is 30 big blinds. Um, so you guys know, because I know the colors are painful. Green is raise and orange is limp. Look at the amount of hands that you limp versus raise against versus the blind versus blind here. We're sitting at 30 big blinds here. You're not going to see it too much, but that's crazy that even at 30 big blinds, you start getting it in blind versus blind. You start getting into jam ranges with 30 bigs with 2-2. I mean, it makes sense, kind of, but 70% of the time you want to be raising. Anyway, let's study heads up. And I just want to walk through this real quick. Look at these ranges, because a lot of times you're going to wind up limping more than you would expect. And when you're limping, you want to protect your limp range, but you want to protect your raise range. Now, right now we're looking at small blind, aka the button in heads up, or in heads up. And remember, blind versus blind, in the small blind, you're going to wind up being out of position the whole time. In heads up, from the small blind you're going to have the button, you're going to be in position the whole time. So strategies do change a lot. And as you see, at 30 big blinds, there's not much you want to be folding. Now, I want you to take this for instance. You have to know the type of player that you're up against. When you're at 30 big blinds, you get an opportunity to kind of feel out who you're playing. And as you start to go down in the amount of blinds that you have, big blinds that you have, you start to see a lot more limping coming in. And then you also see a lot of jamming starting to come in with your non-super nutted premium hands like 7-8 suited and the offsuit aces, your lower pairs. There's not a lot of polar jamming here, but there is polarized raising, where you want to get some of your junk in here to a raise, so you're not always just raising these nutted hands. But it also gives you the opportunity to start making money off of hands that you know you're not going to fold. Now, the point that you want to start deviating from a lot of these charts is based on player pool. I'm going to give you an example. See, at 30 big blinds, you're going to wind up raising a lot more, but then you get down to 15, and this is where we start limping more. And we start getting into those points where you start raising only a polarized range of good, strong hands and some of your junk, but then jamming some of these other hands that aren't necessarily nutted, but you want to realize their equity by stealing the blinds, or you're up against something else that calls and you're going to be in decent shape usually. I am starting to get to the point where I'm not jamming ace deuce and ace three as much. I actually, believe it or not, prefer to be jamming ace five more often than I do these other. I can't tell you how many times I wind up getting dominated there. If you're up against a calling station, somebody that's going to call pretty much everything, you do need to start playing different. Um, so let's talk about some of the four player types and how each one of these. We're going to go over 30. We're going to go from the small blind at 30, 15, and I'm going to say that 15 to 20 is going to play relatively the same, and then from 20 to 30 we're going to play relatively the same. If you look at the difference, like there is a little bit more raising at the 30 big blind range, but um, we're going to call it the same just to keep this short. 15 to 30, we're going to wind up 15 to 20, we're going to do the same. I'll take it down to 12. We'll call 10 to 12 the same. And if you look at 7.5 big blinds, guys, you're pretty much jamming anything that has good equity. So just understand that. We're only going to cover the perception of 21 to 30 bigs as seen with 30 bigs. We're going to go 15 to 20 off of this. And then your strategy from 10 to 15 being the same as what you would do with 10. Player types. So there's going to be four player types that we talk about. The first player type is going to be the tight aggressive person. So this is the person you can predictably put on ranges, but at the same time, when you're playing into them and they have a really strong hand, they're going to be jamming or putting pressure back on you. That's tight aggressive or tag. And the second player type is going to be loose aggressive. Personally, I tend to waver in between personally being a loose aggressive and tight aggressive player. It really depends on my stack size. I don't turn in a total donkey. I'm never going to be a maniac. But I will say that there's something to be said for it. You know what? Well, let's add in five player types. You're going to have the loose aggressive, who you're going to see them doing more raising and lighter three betting, and you're also going to see them putting you to pressure a lot more. You're going to see a lot less checkdowns from them. You're going to see them taking stabs at a lot of pots. That tends to be me. The thing is, with loose aggressive people, it's hard to put them on a hand. It's hard to range them, but at the same time, you can't exploit them. And tag players have a tendency to exploit loose aggressive players. The thing is, loose aggressive players also have a tendency to be able to get in and out of situations and in and out of pots. Know when to apply and when not to. Then you have the maniacs. Maniacs have no capability of being able to shift gears, like they are all in or not. Now, one thing that you're going to have to learn about the maniacs, though, is when they vary or deviate from their usual maniac style, they almost always have a really big hand. If they're showing a little weakness, be mindful. Be very, very mindful. It might be trying to extract some shit from you. Yeah, that happens. So the third player type is going to be the nit or the rock. The nits have a tendency, they're just going to overfold everything but the nuts. They're going to be the ones that sit around for the aces, the kings. So they'll even play ace king pretty passive. Shit, to be honest with you, I play ace king pretty nitty, all things considered. I think I play ace queen better than I play ace king because I can actually fold ace queen. I can't tell you how many times I lose overvaluing and overplaying ace king. It's pretty often. And I still have read books and studied seminars on how to play it, and it's still just a pain in the ass. It really is just a pain in the ass. But nits are one of those people that they play very passive no matter what happens. If a nit wakes up and starts betting, run. You know that they have a really huge hand. And the fifth player type that we're going to talk about is the calling station, or the person that just can't fold. The calling stations they're the ones that you will print money if you can value own them, but don't bluff them. Man, the calling station will never understand You holding the ace of diamonds and a run out of three diamonds on the board comes at the very last, and they wind up having middle pair, and they're just playing their hand and they're going to call it all the way down. They will never understand an overbet jam with you having that nut blocker where most people will go, oh shit, I've got a too high flush here, or I've got middle pair, I've got top pair. They'll never get it. And if you wind up bluffing into a calling station, it's your fault, not theirs. Remember that. So those are player types. Again, it's tight aggressive, loose aggressive, maniac, nit, and calling station. Let's look at how we would play each of these hands against a nit or a calling station. As you start going in here, you're going to see a lot of these limps and then a lot of these raises. Pay attention to where we're starting to get the value. These are our value hands up in here, right? For the most part, most of these and most of these here and to here are high value. Notice that at 30 big blinds, we do start doing a lot of raising. We do want to get our junk in there. The reason why you do this polarized is you're going to get dealt these things, a lot of these things often. When you're in position in a small blind, some of these suited hands still have a lot of value, and you can take them to battle up against some of the bigger hands that somebody's going to be calling a raise with. But at the same time, since we have so many more combinations of these than we're going to have of things like aces and kings, you're going to have better board coverage, but you're also going to have better opportunities to raise and semi-bluff. And right now we're only kind of talking about heads up pre-flop, and post-flop play is a whole different story for another day. But put your mind to this and understand at 30 big blinds, we're wanting to do a little bit of raising and then a lot of limping. It's about 50-50. Actually, it looks like it's 55% limping and 42.5% raising with 2% folding. We're letting go of the obvious 7-deuce and 7-deuce off and 3-deuce off. Admittedly, I might even raise 3-deuce off. Can't tell you how many times I cracked aces and kings and queens and jacks with a wheel draw. There is a case to start adding these in against your nits and some of your tight aggressive people. Simply because you do have some fishy tight aggressive people, so they aren't quite nitty, but they will overfold to flop bets. So you're going to print money bringing in pretty much any hand. Now, when it comes to like the loose aggressives and the maniacs, you actually can start to cut out these ranges. And your range is going to look more, let's see where it starts to get tighter. Your range at 30 big blinds, it's probably going to be around here. Yeah, see, these are the hands against this is 30 big blinds. Your adjustment to cut out these hands here at 30 big blinds would be really important against either the maniac or the loose aggressive that you're going to be facing a lot of 3-bets from. And that's how you exploit them. So not bringing in a lot of these hands, anything offsuit with a 2 in it, anything offsuit with a 3 that does not have a Broadway, you can start to get rid of against the maniac or the loose aggressive. And then what you do try to do is do a little bit, like if you know that they're going to be 3-betting you more often, what you want to do is you want to start limping even. You want to start limping some of these more premium hands against them, knowing that they're going to do the betting for you and that you're going to be in position and be up, like their range is going to be up against you're going to be up against a crappy range versus them with a really solid range. And I can't tell you how many times that helps. So, just to recap before we move out of 30 big blinds, this chart applies to tight aggressives and even even some of the loose aggressives, and definitely the nits. But you do want to start deviating against the maniacs and even some of the lags or the loose aggressives when it comes to it. Uh, let's go down to 20 big blinds from the small blind. And we can cover big blind a completely different day. Here in a small blind, I'm sorry, with 20 big blinds, the biggest difference between the 30 big blind and the 20 big blind is we want to start raising a lot less and we want to start limping a lot more. So take a look. We go from a 55% limp range to a 70% limp range and a 42% raise range to a 27%. Now, you could play this style right here at 30 bigs against any of your loose aggressives and your maniacs. This is the biggest adjustment, understanding and knowing how to exploit people versus player type that you could make. I will even tell you this much. If you're getting into a blind versus blind situation where you're going to be out of position, it is, and you know that you're going to wind up getting 3-bet or you're going to get raised against a lot of these maniacs, you can start playing this range right here against them at all times. So raising some of your junk with the likelihood that you could just toss your polarized junk that they 3-bet or don't fold to, and you can start raising some of your premium hands that they're going to 3-bet you, and then you just jam over the top of them. I cannot tell you how often that prints for me in blind versus blind and heads up positions. See if you when you start adding this in. Wait, sorry guys. Yeah. Man, I wish they had how to defend against raises. Anyway. So I hope you guys are kind of following along with this. I don't see any questions. I also don't know where this is going live to, but let's continue on with it. Understanding these concepts, we do start to see at the 20 big blind range jams. Now, against a calling station, you got to be careful when you start jamming the 2s and the 3s, because there's a lot of times they just call you down with like King 8 and you're up against a hand that's literally a coin flip. You do have to know your player types to deviate from these charts. Please, for the love of God, do not go by charts and only stick to them without adjusting to the player type that you're going up against. If you don't know how to judge or determine the player type, then that is a whole nother story. Please find me and either whisper me on Twitch, email me at zacharymarcy@gmail.com, and we'll start getting into more how, I can actually just sit down and do like a real quick coaching session. Just tell me that you did this. I'll do it pretty inexpensively, but the whole point is you have to learn to differentiate and pay attention and start taking notes on these player types. Cut back on trying to maximize like 10, 12 MTTs or singles at a time. Keep it down to like 2 or 3, maximum 4. Take notes, tag each one of these people, use your own color scheme, but make sure that you are getting the player types and understanding how at each stack depth you're going to be playing them. Because by the time that you get heads up with them, usually in a sit and go or a final table, you will have played minimum 30 to 50 hands against them, seeing how they act, seeing what they show down, and crammed this information into a a note on what kind of player type they might be, notes into how they handle these things, and seeing all of that showdown value and taking those showdowns, even if you're not in the hand, into notes, formulating a game plan for when you get heads up. This is super, super important. I see a lot of guys nowadays, some people that had the capability of being able to multi-table, let's say 30 tournaments all at the same time. We're talking like big crushers that have been printing money in sit and goes. They just can't do it anymore. They're losing their edge because the game has changed so much. People understand value of raising and putting people to the test. They also will see if you're playing this very predictable, tight, aggressive style and you're only going off of the sheer strength of your hand, which most multi-tablers wind up having to do. They're going to run wild bluffs on you, and they're going to capitalize on that a lot. But you need to know these players. So cut back on the multi-tabling. Start putting people into player type mode. Understand there are some people that still have the capability of doing this. Go look at like Sean Deeb and him explaining how he could run complex bluffs, even multi-tabling. But you're also talking about multi-million-dollar poker player who's won Player of the Year multiple times, multiple World Series of Poker bracelets. You're talking about outliers. You're probably not that. I'm not that. Stick with this. Anyway, I killed that concept. So looking at this, when we jump down, just take note that those strategies that change, you also need to change those strategies with the player type. These are still pretty straightforward. You do not want to deviate much from the raise, the lip style, even if somebody is a nit or if they are a loose aggressive or tight aggressive. The where you want to start deviating from these charts is to who you are jamming into, especially with these hands. I like the ace-5 off jam. I actually don't mind. I never like not raising ace-5 suited. It's just too strong of a hand to not start piling in some value. The areas that you do need to start getting very careful with is playing the suited aces against a maniac, or playing them against a loose aggressive or a tight aggressive, and they start playing back at you, and if an ace hits the flop and you're not going towards a draw. Those are some of the things, like, I find myself often really dominated with ace-9s and the ace-8s, where I'm getting a lot of like donk leads and resistance post flop. And then understanding if you haven't made two pair, or if you're not redrawing towards a flush, so a lot of these get dominated by all of these hands. So understand that. It's why you start jamming some of these hands, because they're going to realize their equity better to a jam than they are trying to play post flop. And it's also the reason why these suited king hands, you do want to start raising with them, but you don't want to play them for just the sheer strength of the king. You want to start playing them for more of the strength of the suitedness of them, and also the potential of making two pair. But be very careful for that navigating with just the king. It's often dominated. You'd be in a lot better shape if you're playing top pair with the 8 or the 7 or the 6 if they're top pairs, and also somebody's pushing back into you, that you have that king kicker. Because a lot of times you'll wind up being up against something like pocket 7s on, like, let's say a 8-4-2 board. You've got the 8, somebody's pushing into you with pocket 7s, and you've got a really good kicker too. Or even the fact that they have, let's say, 8-7 on that same board, so they have a backdoor draw, and you're playing king 8. with a better kicker. You see it happen often. That's the reason why you want to start lumping those in. Let's jump down to 15 big blinds. And this is where we start seeing big deviations between what you jam and what you don't. Now, I will say this, in the micro stakes, if you don't have the capability of being able to play sixes, fives, fours, threes, and twos post flop, I recommend at 15 big blinds starting to jam those hands against pretty much everybody. If you're real bad at post flop play, add those into your jam range. You do want to be jamming those against the nits. You want to be jamming those against the tight aggressives. You could probably even potentially make the case for jamming those up against the some of the loose aggressives and even some of the calling stations. Calling stations, like you start taking sevens down in there, they're going to be calling with some shit like king five suited, or man, you see just so much. You see them taking like the ace deuces in with a call to a jam so often, and they're only drawing two outs or three outs with your aces, and that's the reason why you realize more equity with these smaller pocket pairs and these junky ace rags with either fold equity. You do want to kind of deviate from jamming these. I do prefer jamming these hands against the maniacs and the calling stations than I start taking some of these out, but I will add in like an ace five suited jam. I always raise this though. I hope that makes sense. And then against the nits, you can start adding. Quite frankly, I like this strategy against the nits, even at 15 big blinds, than I do this strategy. But going against most tight aggressives, going against most loose aggressives, I would follow these charts. Guys, remember, you could just screenshot, you can stop and save these, put them in your phone, and go from there. As you see here, what happens when you go from 15 big blinds to 12, raising comes out, and it's a jam fold game, or sorry, fold jam limp range game. For the sake of making this easy, we're going to treat from 10 all the way up to 15, up to 14 big blinds as if you had 10 big blinds. Also, anything under 10 big blinds, like if you drop under 10 big blinds, guys, start jamming out everything that's suited, jamming out everything that has an ace, king, queen, or a jack. Start jamming any pair. Basically, just get it in as long as it isn't an offsuit 2 or an offsuit 3 without a Broadway. You can even, full transparency, depending on player type, I like nits and tags. Guys, I might even lump in this entire chart. Calling stations and maniacs, you want to start leaning more towards probably this style, even at 5. No, that's too loose. That's too light. Even against loose aggressives and maniacs, you can start going to the 7.5 big blind range. Play against at 5 big blinds, knowing that you're probably going to get 3-bet. So you can even just limp in a lot of these strong hands at 5 big blinds, knowing that they're going to barrel off really light, and you just snap them, and you ensure that you're getting paid. But let's jump into the 10 big blinds, and then we'll do some hand review and call it a day. So here, as you look, your jamming is actually super polarized, right? You don't see a lot of, like, the difference between 15, what you're raising with, those raises go out, and we start to add in more jams with a lot of these more speculative and polarized hands. but then you do start limping in. You let go of a lot of these that you're not looking for board coverage. What you're looking for is anything that's going to have showdown value if it gets called with a jam. And that's the main reason why you um, see, and again, I would personally jam nines down through the twos, and I would also start to do, um, I would start jamming in some of these other suited connectors that you see them in here, but I would even start jamming in some of these suited connectors that are offsuit. Um, and limping these are important. The reason why, against tight aggressive people, you might want to do a small 2x raise to start getting value in. And same thing against the nits. But you do want to be limping these against the maniacs, the calling stations. Even against the calling stations, you might want to put in some of the raises here. I got 1 minute. And then what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a position to maximize the value out of this against the player type. And you know what? I'm going to leave it at that. Guys, we'll do the hand review a little bit later today. If I hope that helped a lot of you guys with some of the heads up and how to navigate it and how to value your hands. Make sure you jump in and take some screenshots of how these play out. Let me know if you need any help with any of this. Again, like I can coach you through some of these heads up spots. You can bring in any of these hands into me with hand examples. I'd love to bring it onto the stream and provide some content for it. So please hit me up. Remember, be the shark, not the fish. May all of your big hands hold, and may all your bluffs get through.